we wanted to take a look at using React to generate a UI to allow the user to select items in the rich media editor inside of Canvas. So let me just show that really quickly. So here we are, we're logged into Canvas and we're editing a page, and I've just called the page media selector. We have this LTI button in place. That's from a previous example when we worked on the content item selection. And if I click it, it will pull up this screen, which allows me to select one of these two logos. So if I click on one of those, it should load that content, and it embeds it, I think, as an iframe or something, which is why it shows up this way. So we want to make this a nicer user experience so that when you click on the LTI button right here, this UI is a little bit cleaner, and we're going to use React to generate that UI and then interact with the server to generate all of the pieces we need. So here goes. So the first thing we'll need to do is go into this settings.js. This is the entry points for our applications. It looks like in the UTS starter app here that the University of Technology at Sydney, Sonya started building. We've got this app content selector. So we should have the corresponding JSX file, and we do. So we want to put this React application into the page that's loaded. So we have to go and find that page, and it just so happens it's this index page underneath content items. Again, this is from the example we worked on last time. So pulling up that page, you can see we're just generating straight up HTML, and that is what gets displayed right here. So select content item, and then you can see that select content item. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete all the HTML. Just going to get rid of this, and throw this away. And then we're going to insert the code that we need to actually inject the JavaScript application in the page. Now, there's an example of this right here in the LTI launches. So you can see we had it commented out, but if you need to reference anything, it's just in the LTI launches. This is the standard sort of setup that we use when we write Ruby on Rails applications and want to have those applications generate a client-side application that can render React, or actually could render anything, it's just we use React. Okay, so now if I drop back into here, I can just paste this in. We're going to go grab this content item selector. So that, let's see here. Okay, so one other thing, we're using this current LTI application instance, and then we have the client application name as part of the LTI application. So I think what we want to do is go set that up. So we're going to drop into the seeds file. Previously we had this LTI outcomes, and here's the client application name right there. So I can just change this, and I think that for right now that's what I'm going to do. Oops, it's not called client application name. It's going to correspond directly to this entry right here, which is app content item selector. So we're going to grab that, and we're going to go drop that into the seeds file. And what that's going to do is change how we seed the database. We're going to have to go out and reseed the database. And it's also going to tell the launch here in this index HTML, in this client application name, to go out and use that specific JavaScript application. So again, you can write as many of these as you want. If we wanted to, we could also, in fact, maybe I'll do this. I guess I'm hesitating to just rename the one that's already there. Let's just make a new one. So I'm going to copy this. This is probably better form. We're going to call this our media selector. And now you can see we have two LTI applications. So I kind of like this better. And this is going to be rich media editor tool. It's for selecting media content. Okay, so this is going to integrate into the editor. It's going to allow you to pick stuff that we're going to inject into the application. I don't yet know what Canvas API permissions we need, so I'm just going to delete that. Let's start with 0. I think that's going to be more secure because we don't necessarily need to talk to the Canvas API. All right, and then we need the name of it. So again, that's going to be this name right here. We're going to put that, oops, not there, we're going to put it right there. Okay. So now we need to create an instance of that, and that's what we'll use here. So I'm going to copy this guy right here. Just paste another instance in, and this one is going to be called Media Selector. Now I've given it the same name as the application up here, but this is an instance of the application. So I mean, we could actually call it Media Selector Dev, so that we know this is a dev instance, and then we could create a production instance and staging instance and so on and so forth. All right, so the consumer URI for this, I am going to, now this is important when you talk to the Canvas API, and we're probably not, well, it's important for the Canvas API and probably, yeah, it shouldn't affect the LTI code, so we just need it for the Canvas API. So I'm just going to leave that in place. Well, no, I'm not. I'm going to change it. Sorry, that's my bad. I'm going to change this to uts.atomicjolt.xyz. That way, if we do end up needing to talk to a Canvas instance, it'll hit my local machine. I don't want it to hit my local machine either, because I don't have Canvas turned on right now, and I don't want to go set it up. So let's do this. atomicjolt.instructure.com. So that'll hit the Atomic Jolt instance. And we can change that back to the UTS instance, or it can be anything we want. So that's a pretty easy thing to change. And this is going to pull the Canvas token out of the secrets, which I have set up already. Now this is going to use the default LTI key that's also in the secrets and the default secret as well. I don't want to use the default key because we were using that for LTI outcomes, and it's probably, you probably don't want to use the secrets typically for the LTI key and secret. The only reason I did it here is so that the LTI secret is always the same, so that we can pull it from a place where it's kind of secure. The secrets is going to is relatively secure because it's not committed to the repository. But the key in this case, I'm going to change, and we're just going to call this thing Media Selector. Like that. Okay. So now what that will do is it will change how we set up the database. So we need to go reset our database. So I've got my console right here. Let's kill the Rails application. I'm using Postgres, so if you try to reset the database while you're running your Rails application, Postgres will say you can't drop the database because somebody's using it, which is nice, but you just have to remember to turn on Rails. So I'm going to do a rakedb reset, and this will wipe everything in the database out. All right, looks like it has a problem with the admin. Let's see, let me make sure this actually reset the database. Huh, okay. So it is having an issue creating the admin user in Seeds, which is strange because I just barely did this.
Is it line 16? There's in the seeds file.
Right here.
Yeah. Where does it open?
Oh, this one right here opens right here. So that should be okay.
Yeah.
So these are just arrays of LTI applications and LTI application instances. It seemed to have a problem with this guy, and I'm not sure why, because, yeah, it didn't want to create this admin user, which is probably fine, because in all reality, we don't need it for this example, or at least for this code that we're working on. It's just suspicious, because I did this right before, and it worked just fine. And we're using the apartment gem, which creates multiple Postgres schemas. That's why this is having a fit right here. So again, I can just do a rake db drop, just wipe out everything. Yeah, it's strange that it's having problems creating the admin. Setup. Oh no, must be a different 43. No, so it must not like something about this guy. It's not the admin. Oh, I am not smart here. These have to match up. Okay, sorry, I didn't see this before. So see, this is kind of fragile. But this name right here is how the instance finds the application it's supposed to be related to. And I probably should just embed the instances underneath here or something. So this right here should be media selector, not media selector dev. That's my bad. Okay. So now that should work. And then this is where you would specify something like media selector dev or staging and whatnot. But these names have to match up. So, okay, that makes sense. Okay. Now this should work. There we go. All right, and you can see that it output the different LTI configs just as part of the seeds. But we're not going to use any of these ones. The one that we want is actually sitting here in the content items controller. It's this guy right here. So just make sure everything still looks good. Okay. So now if I go to so this is where I have it running on my, I gotta start it back up. I have it running on my local machine at uts.atomicjolt.xyz. Could be localhost 3000, or you can use ngrok or any of those. So content items setup. This page is from this controller right here, the content items controller. We added the setup method that generates the XML. This is just for convenience. We might want to move this into that same LTI configs at some point. It's just for convenience. Here's where you can get the LTI configuration. All right, so we'll grab that, go back into here, close that. All right, so I have this media, let's UTS media, so let's delete that one so we don't end up with two of these guys in there. Add a new one. Drop the XML into here. Let's see. Add this LTI key and secret. There's the secret. And let's call this UTS Media Selector. Okay, so now if I go back into Pages, edit this guy. So hopefully this still works. Okay, we hit something. I'm not sure that that's what I wanted it to hit. Oh, I think it is. Because I think that this is, let's see, we did this, and we're set up here, and now we're set up here, and so now let's go look inside of this code. Sorry, this is in the client directory, so we have this new JSX application that we were building, and we told it to load that, so as long as that's what we're seeing, we should be good. This guy is getting its routes from here. So it should have this index and this home page, which come from components. Here's the home page, and what score do you want? So I believe this is the right screen, so it did what we wanted it to. And I think this is some leftover from another example. So we'll start here. All right, so we've got this home page sitting here. Let's go ahead and start getting rid of things, because all of this is just going to be junk. Let's hoping the hot reload would just work, but I don't think it did. Okay, so we've got this data coming out of our state. All right, so this is going to be our starting place. All right, so the first thing we're going to need to do is load all of the items that we want to display for the user to select from. So this UI is going to, at least for the moment, it'll look similar to the previous UI where it's just going to have a couple of items listed, and we're going to click one, and then we're going to insert that into the rich media editor. Okay, so semicolon there. Let's clean these up just a little bit, except for application controller. So application controller is where this fake content items array lives. And I'm just going to keep using that for now until we decide, like, well, actually, I take that back. Do we want to have like a content items database? Do you want to have a database of these things? Do you know where you're going to get the list of items to insert into the editor? No? Okay.
No.
Okay, we'll just keep it as content items for now, because it'll be pretty easy to swap that out and add a model or API calls or something else later on, but this will give us a starting place. Okay, so what we did before is we had content items controller. This index would list out all of those items, and you can see that's what we're doing right here. And then you would click one and it would call the show method, and that's what would handle the post back to Canvas to actually do the insert for us. But we're going to remove all that now. So right here in this index, we don't have to do any of this stuff anymore. The only thing we have to do is render the client application. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's just refresh this page, just make sure everything is still working. Click this guy. All right, so it's still showing us the old UI. It should have switched over to say hello. So I wonder if, it doesn't look like we broke anything here. Let's stream. No, we have to redo the LTI launch. Let me check here. So here we have the home JSX. So this guy's just using routes. All right, so that is the correct home and index components. So there's home, and there's index. Interesting. I'm not entirely sure where that is coming from. Let's do it one more time here. Sorry. And all those, and then it's this launch that we care about. Yeah, which I'm not going to see. Oh, that's why. It is coming from LTI outcomes assessments.ngrok.io. So in that XML that we pasted in, I think we had some incorrect values. Although I'm not seeing incorrect values. I wonder. That's really strange. Because this should be hitting my machine with this uts.atomicjolt.xyz. Here's the launch URL, so that's correct. Let me go look at this configuration again. So I deleted it, so it should not show up anymore. So if it continues to show up, it means there's a different tool. Okay, so it's gone, so that's good. Let's go ahead and add the app back in. Okay, here's the XML describing the application. For what it's worth, all of this stuff is just definition for IMS Global. Here's the title. So we can even change this title to be something else. So I'm going to call it UTS Media Selector. So that's what will show up in this list now. That'll help. Demonstrates. Huh. Someone used to demonstrate. Apparently isn't. Okay. Someday I'll learn how to spell. Demonstrates rich media LTI tool. All right, this launch URL looks correct. Privacy level is set to public. That means anybody, including students, could potentially see this. So we might change that to admin if this is only for instructors or TAs. Here's the editor button. This is the part that actually inserts it into the editor. Here's its message type. Let's change this to UTS button. That can be the text. You can see it's going to call our index page. So all of that looks just fine to me. Oh, we need to give the name.
I think I know what it is. I hard-coded the ngrok URL in the Webpack Helper RB.
Oh, okay. That'll do it. All right, so let's go fix that.
It's not you.
Okay,
It's me.
no worries. At first I thought it was in this. Maybe it was reading something in this LTI configuration, but
Yeah, because I couldn't get Webpack to work on my install, so I just hard coded it. But I think that's what's causing it now.
Okay, so that shouldn't be too hard to fix, hopefully.
Yeah. All
right, let's make sure we got the tool installed. Okay, so we're that far. So this is kind of funny because I think it's loading this screen off of your computer So anyway, so here I am in Utah in the United States, bringing up an application that's running on Amazon servers somewhere in Virginia probably, that's loading data from your computer in Australia.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Weird. No.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, 100 years ago, people would be like, this would have been magic. Okay, so we need to go into Webpack Helper RB. Oh, sure enough, that's it right there. Okay, so let's see, in our default, we do. Oh, okay, so this would normally look like that. So,
And down in line 29 as well.
yeah.
CSI.
I'm just going to comment this out for now, in case you need to put that back in, if it's giving you lots of grief. So we need to change this one. Oops. To that. There we go. All right, so this should fix our problem, I think. Oh, there we go. Now it says hello. All right, on to the next piece then. Let's close this out. Close this. And all right, so now what we want is for this home page to render a list of these items for us. So instead of saying hello, it'll show us items. Let's create a new component. I'm going to create a new folder in here, put it under Media Selector. That way, if you have more than one app, we can kind of compartmentalize these into different folders. And let's just call this item.jsx. And I think that this will look something like, well, let's go grab some of the HTML from the last item. So maybe we'll do something kind of like this. All right, so we need to create an actual component here. And so in this component, in this home component, it needs to have access to the state. That's what this does right here. And then this connect method is from Redux. But in this item component, we don't need access to the state. So I think all we need, I'm going to still do this as a class for now. So we'll import React. That gives us the React components. Export, let's call this an item. Export default. So this exports item as the default class. This will be, or sorry, yeah, as the default object from this file. We'll have a render method that is going to return this right here. And now we need to do something about this because this is our Rails code, and so that's not going to work. I think we can still make this a link, but it's going to be a link that doesn't do anything. Instead, it'll have it on click. On click.
Is that a capital C in on click?
Yeah, it is. Thanks. There we go. And then No, we don't need to do that. All right, so basically when it clicks, it's going to call this select method, which we'll deal with here in just a second. I was thinking I brought over the name, but I did not. All right, I'm going to just get rid of this. It's going to be something like this.props.item.name. I'm going to do this too. Okay. Something like this. I'm going to take this off for right now. My linter is still having problems with this. Oh, probably because I didn't do that right. There. Okay. So now we've created a really basic React component, just called an item. Let's see if we can get this to render. So inside of here now, we can say import item. All right, so now we actually need to be able to get a hold of the items. So items is going to have to come from probably state.items. So we're going to have to go make that happen. For now, I'm just going to make this an empty array, just so that there's some enumerable object that we can work with. Okay, so let's. Sorry, I'm going to clean this up a little bit soon. So each item is going to be a list item. So let's render those into a list. And now we have to go get those items. Let's bring in Lodash. So then I can iterate over this collection. So now I can do that map over this.props.items, and each item is going to be the result of, let's see, return that. Okay, so that'll give us a collection of items that we can then render right here. We could probably just do this in line, but whatever. We're going to go with this for now. I'm going to get rid of this state object just so that we don't have a bunch of junk. That was from the previous example, so let's get rid of that. And now, hopefully this, let's do this. Let's just render something into there so we have an example. That. Okay. So now if we push the LTI button, oh, we broke it. That's because I'm not writing tests as I go. Probably should be writing tests. Render method of home. All right. So, oh, you know what it is? It's this right here. I did not see that. Okay, there we go. So, item is the default thing exported, so that should work. Okay. Okay, there we go. So now we have a list and we have the IM item. All right, so that was kind of painful, but figured out. All right, so now when
Life lesson.
yeah, I'll at least yeah.
Can we start recording again?
Yeah, I have it recording, and I'll go back and edit out some of the time just so that you don't have to sit there and watch me fumble over it for 20 minutes.
I learned a lot. So thank you.
Oh, you bet. Okay, so we've got this item, and now when we do something with this item, we want, well, when we click on this item, we want it to insert it. So let's go look at that. So inside of here, we can just put this in a link tag that doesn't really do anything and say on click, do some stuff. All right. So on click, I think we want it to call a method inside of here. So we'll grab the event and we'll say this dot select. All right. So we could also just pass in a method that we want to call. So I think I'm going to actually do that. So let's create a method inside of the parent class and call it SelectItem, and it will receive as a parameter an item. And then when we generate all these items, we can say, let's just do on click like that. So this thing will have its own on click, and when that happens, we want it to call this dot select item. Well, actually, yeah, this dot select item. So we're going to pass this function down into the component so that it calls this select item. So now inside of here, we can do this dot props dot select item, and we're going to give it this dot props dot item. So when we click on this thing, we're going to call this method, and it's just going to push that up to the parent. There we go. And for now, let's do console.log item.name. So there's the item. We'll fix this in just a minute. So when I click on this item, it looks like nothing happened. It looks like select item is not a function, so it did not like that. So props, select item. Oh, that's because we called it on click. We didn't call it select item. Let's call it select item. That's probably going to be a little less confusing anyway, so it doesn't look like it's pretending to be a button. All right, so now it'll actually be called select item because that's what we called it right here. So there it's calling our method. Let's get these breakpoints. And you can see we've logged I am an item. Okay. So really what we want to have happen is generate call to canvas to insert content item. And this will look kind of like what we did before with the form. All right, I'm going to pause on that piece though, because right now we've just hard-coded this items right here, and really we want to get that from the server. So let's do that next. So when this home JSX loads, we'll get part of the React component lifecycle as a component will mount. So when this thing mounts, we want to call a method. We're going to call it load items. And of course, the properties doesn't actually have a load items on it right now, but we're going to make one. So we're going to say import load items, and this time I do want the curly braces around it because this is going to be from our actions where we will have multiple exports potentially. So this will go into the actions folder, and let's create a items file. So we'll go make that here in just 1 second. All right, so load items now has to become a property, and the way that you do that with the connect method is you just pass that in. So pass it in right there. So now that action, that method will be available to us. The action that we write will just generate a plain old JavaScript object, but the Redux framework is going to wrap that in a call to state.dispatcher, I think is what they still call it. Anyway, it's underneath the hood, so don't worry about it. Okay, so we'll call items.js, or make a file called items.js, and it looks like these guys. So I'm just going to copy paste out of here, and then we'll get rid of the scores because we don't actually need scores anymore. Like that. Okay, so the action that we want is going to make an API request, and in this case, it's going to be load items. This stuff. So now we have our method. We need to make this call. This is going to be a get, and we're going to make a new API endpoint on the server side called items, and go ahead and get rid of the body. All right, so this will load up our items. Now, of course, this isn't done because we'll have to deal with the state, but we'll do that again in a minute as well. So underneath API, we're going to create a new controller called items controller, and we have to add it to our routes underneath API. We could use just a generator to do this, but where it's just a controller, it's almost easier just to type it up. So the API will have a new routes, or a new controller underneath it called items. That'll generate all the routes that we need. For now, I'm going to assume that we probably do want like a show and a delete, maybe. So we'll just leave it with everything. Okay, just copy and paste one of these other controllers, and instead of the jots, don't need this, but we do want the validate token, so that'll add some amount of security to say that they actually have to have a valid jot token before they can call this method. This is going to be our index method, and our items are going to equal, let's see, application controller. So here's our fake content items sitting right here. So we're just going to keep using those. So we have that. And now we can just render the items back to the client as an object, JSON object. Or I guess that's redundant as JSON. All right, so this should all happen kind of automatically because this right here, we have a piece of middleware. Let's call it middleware. So this piece of middleware is going to pick up that this guy right here has a method called get, and it's going to just make an API request for us. It's going to recognize that this is the URL, so it's going to call that URL. And then the result of it, it will dispatch with done added on to the end of our constant. So it'll be load items underscore done. Okay. In theory, that should make the API call. Let's go ahead and see if that works. So click on this guy. All right, so it looks like there was some kind of an error. Let's see what happened. So on the Rails side, undefined method validates. So actually, we did need this right here, because it's this concern that allows us to validate the Jolt token. So here's the validate token method. So you actually have to include that. So I shouldn't have deleted it. Okay, let's try that again. All right, and that time it did work. Well, we're still actually getting the data from the server. So let's go. I mean, we are getting the data from the server on the client, but then we just throw it away. We don't do anything with it right now. So let's take care of that. All right. So in the client folder underneath JS, there's a folder called reducers. So we need to go add a new reducer. This is going to be our items reducer. So this essentially will add a new piece of state. So when you use Redux, you have one giant global state, and then each one of these reducers tacks on a piece of state to that global state that uses the same name as the reducer. So just for reference, if this is my one global object, you'll notice I have an application reducer here. So there will be an application sub-object hanging off of there. There'll be a Jolt, which is actually just going to be a string in our case. There's going to be the settings object, that's data that comes off of the server. And now that we're adding items, there will be an items array, actually. And this state has to be immutable. So we will make it immutable. So let's add a new reducer. Let's see what we did right there. Okay. So you can see that at its heart, the excuse me, the reducers are really quite simple. So let's grab that, paste that in here. Our initial state is going to be just an array, and then when we receive this action that we just wrote, let's see, there's none of these. This guy handles it right here. So you can see how this uses the Jolt constants and looks for the done. So we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to import constants, and instead of from JWT constants, we're going to import them from items. So import constants as, now we'll just import the constants because I don't think we need to rename them, from actions, items. Oops, items. So that will bring in this, see we export constants right here. So this load items will also have a load items done. That's what this wrapper does. So now if I go into my reducer, we should have a case for constants dot load items underscore done. All right. So now if I, let's see, I'll just back up. So you can see in the case of the jots, we just replace it. So when we get those, we just return a new one. And that's perfectly acceptable. We didn't modify the previous one, we just threw it away and returned a brand new one. And I'm going to do the exact same thing here. So we're just going to return a new one, a new set of data. And in this case, it's just going to be the data that was returned to us from the server. It'll be part of the payload on the action. And if Rails does what it usually does, which I think it'll do here, it'll have an item, a value called items as part of the return payload. So if I put that in the right place, this will work. All right, so when the items are done loading, we're going to return those guys. Now going back to home, so we've kind of come full circle here. We have this select, and before we were just hard coding a value. We're not going to hard code a value anymore because it should be part of state.items now. Now the initial state of this is just going to be an empty array. So we won't get anything, and it won't do anything, it won't render anything. But then when we get the values back from the server, items should be an array of objects that we can map over. So let's see if we did that correctly. It is possible that the data that comes back from the server will not be in the shape that we're expecting, and we'll have to deal with that. Let's close this, clear this out. Okay, so we're getting an unauthorized now. So the Rails controller is not granting us access. Which is interesting. So validate token is not returning the real value. I'm sorry, validate token is saying that our token is invalid. API.js. So the middleware sends up that jot token, which it did right here. All right, let's see what's going on. Just throw a debugger in there. Huh, that's interesting. That's the problem, is the jot token is totally invalid. So let's go figure out why you're not getting a valid jot token. Wait a minute. Yeah, it's a client, so that looks fine. Render layout client. My suspicion is that this is not making its way, but it's in there. So the default client settings are being sent. Support. LTI support. Oops. Sorry. I toggle between tabs. Sometimes it changes my desktop.
Did you update all your secrets when you changed over to your domain?
Let's see. I did.
Okay.
My suspicion is that somewhere in the values coming down from the server, the JOT is not being set correctly, or it's being generated in a way that makes it invalid or something. Sorry, that's probably not very clear, but
Yeah. It's so difficult.
Yeah, it should be. This part of it should be fairly automatic. It's one of those problems where, oh, this always just works, and then when it doesn't, I have to go remember where it is that things come apart. So let's do this. Let's just look at the API call. Right there. Maybe. Okay, there we go. So there should be a state.jwt. That's what's wrong. See, there's no JOT token. State.settings has this stuff in it. So why? Well, that's actually really interesting because state.settings should have a whole bunch of the LTI launch information in there. So this is actually a bigger problem. This is the page that we're launching from. You can see it has this shared default client settings. It should render all of this stuff in there. But it's saying we're not signed in. So you can see it rendered these two things, and then all of this stuff is missing. So that's curious. Oh, I probably just did something wrong. Right. Sorry. I gotta close these down. It's just making me crazy to have so many tabs open. It's an OCD. Oh, you know. So this do LTI is what logs you in on an LTI launches controller. And look at that. We are not calling it here, so that's the problem. We need to call the do LTI at least for the index. Okay, so that will log us in and give us all those values. So let's try this again.
So cool.
Except now we aren't even loading this page. So let's go look at the Rails side of things. This do LTI. Oh yeah, it is an LTI support. I was just saying LTI support. Here's the do LTI method. Oops. There we go. So now if I click on that guy, it should land inside of there. Okay. All right, so that says that we have a valid request, so that's good. Our nonce is valid, and hopefully our timestamp is valid. Okay, so all of those are valid, so that's good, but we still end up with the user not authorized. Okay, so we've got a problem somewhere else. I bet it can't generate this user from the LTI launch. So something inside of here is probably going bad. Okay, so that tells me that everything about the LTI launch was valid. And now this is trying to find a user. It probably did not. Oh, it did find one. So it found a user. So it returns that user. Now it's going to sign us in, and that's going to work. That is really suspicious. No? Huh. It signed us in. Okay. Let's keep looking. So this returns the user. LTI. Two breakpoints in here. All right. So this is interesting because we have a user. So it should just call sign in and return from here. But it still takes us to unauthorized. Secure launch. Okay, this is not the do LTI piece. That was, I just assumed that it was. That was bad on my part. Okay, so all of this is working right here. So the LTI launch, that does work. The secure launch is not. So this is doing the exact same thing. We can get rid of that. Okay, so we're basically doing the LTI launch twice. Let's get rid of this code. It is interesting though that it doesn't recognize that as a valid LTI request. Okay. So I think this is a leftover from the example when we were talking about this. So instead of having the full, this do LTI that I frequently use, I think we just use this secure launch, which was also a LTI method, or it was a method that validated the LTI launch. So we're trying to validate it twice, and this one is not working. So we can just get rid of that one. Let's see. Change those to before action. All right. Check is content item. Okay, that's fine because this is basically just checking to make sure that what you're doing is a content item selection, because that's what we're doing. And we don't want other routes to land here. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so we're still getting an unauthorized. So there's all of our settings. So it looks like that's working correctly now. There's our default Jolt token, so that worked. All right, so we've made some progress. Still not there yet, but we're getting closer. So now we can go look at the error. Huh. That looks like it worked. See, there's our items controller index is JSON, and then I'm seeing a 200. This is showing. Oh, is it calling? No, it's calling the right thing. Let's clear this out and try it one more time. I think it is working. You can see that it called right there and it did work. Okay, so server side, we're good now. So now we need to figure out why it's not rendering correctly. And that's going to be in home.jsx. So let's take a look and see what these items look like. So I would have, oh, you know what? I did one other thing. Totally forgot this. I mean, it was in the back of my mind while we were talking, then I got distracted. This was the other thing you have to do with a reducer. Notice that there's index.js. You have to import it into here. So this is like the main reducer. You have to bring them all together. Okay. So now let's try this again. Okay. So looks like something is still not quite right. We do have a reducer now, but now the reducer it thinks is returning undefined. So action payload items must be undefined, so let's deal with this. This is what I meant about the shape of the data coming back from the server might not be what we expect, and I think that's the most likely scenario here. All right, so we have action.payload. No. It's legitimately objects, or the items. Oh, no, it isn't. It's just action.payload. That's what's going on. So there's action.payload and it just returns this stuff. All right, so when I did the API call here, that is just rendering out items. That's really hard. I guess that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. It's just turning this array in. I forgot. We're not using active support. We're not using models. We're just rendering plain old arrays. So that's exactly what we're getting back on the client. Okay. So that's fine. This should now return us valid data. because we're just using the action payload there. There we go. So UTS logo, UTS banner. A lot of work to get two plain old boring links onto the page, but
it's great. It just makes me understand the relationships between like Ruby, React, and Redux an awful lot more. I often think debugging is the best tool that you can have. So it's great to see how you do it.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and I am being a little lazy here, and I haven't been writing tests, but we should do that too. And I haven't just because of limited time here, but ideally, yeah, we'd be writing the specs as we go, and that will give you some more insight to how the code works, as well as, we're building up code debt by not writing specs, but we'll fix that too.
It's okay. We're innovators. It's okay.
That's right. Well, and we're kind of experimenting here. I wanted to make sure that all this stuff works as expected before we get too far into it.
Yeah.
All right. How much longer do you want to go? Are you kind of wearing out?
That was pretty taxing, so thank you so much for persevering.
Oh, sure.
What I'm concerned about is that those that's coming from the Rails assets, those images. Do we need to change that over so that Webpack bundles it rather than using the Rails assets?
So, by
Or
images,
work?
you mean these things right here? Right now we're just showing the names, but there are images there as well, and that's a really good question and can be a little bit challenging. To answer that question, I think we'll need to decide where the items live and where they come from. So right now, the items are just coming out of this application controller, right? And so we give them the source, and we assume that they're on the server. They're going to be served up by Rails. Now we could say, oh, let's put those into the Webpack bundle and let Webpack do it. But what I anticipate is you would have some kind of an interface for adding new content items. Like, here are the items we want to make available to our users. And you might have an interface for uploading those. At that point, then, those items might live, the logos, the images for those items might live on S3. Or they could live in your Rails database. It could really be anywhere. And so the question of where or how do we want to get those to show up correctly in the client application is really one of, let's figure out how we want to architect this application and what kind of experience we want for our users. So yeah, that becomes a little bit more of a challenging question to answer. But I think the more in-depth the more immediate question there would be, if you have an image on the Rails side, how on earth do you get it to show up on the client side? And that can also be tricky because, like, this uts.png, when it's distributed through the Rails asset pipeline, it's going to be renamed. So it's not going to be uts.png anymore. And I think the way, let's see, how have we handled this before? I think one of the ways is we actually generate these kind of data objects in a view. And when you do that, you can let the Rails URL builder output the URL and then read it from, like the settings object or something from inside of the page. So that will work. You don't want to do that with thousands of items, though. So, one of the other things I guess we could try here is I'll have to think of the best way to do that. I'm not entirely sure right offhand. So we'll deal with that one when I've had.
Yeah, no, that was my kind of. So when I got the rich content editor working with Ruby and I got through the Rails assets, it was like, how am I going to do this with React? And then I thought, is React the best tool to be using for like rich content editors? Because, yeah.
Well, I think for building the UI, for selecting items, because that's basically what we're doing here. Is this is just a UI that lets you select an item. So depending on how many things you might insert, you might have like a search bar up there or kind of a slick UI for browsing and finding these items. If you were integrating with third parties, they might have thousands and thousands of different assets that you could insert. So having a really nice UI right here to make that simple would be really nice. And so I think React would serve you well in that regard. It sort of just depends on how many of these things you have.
Yeah, so right now I'm just looking at the functionality and seeing what is possible. So that's why these kind of tutorials are incredible, because it kind of gives me an idea of how much work has to go into them.
That's well.
Yeah.
This has been in about an hour. We've gotten this far with a couple of glitches here and there, which is going to be common, right? Like that's development. You're going to have those issues.
Yeah, I like those issues. You learn so much more.
Yeah.
Than when it actually, that means my app works. I don't know what I did. Yeah. Lots of those moments. So I'm happy to leave it there if you are. I think we only have a couple of hours left.
Okay.
And I'm quite interested in injecting scripts into the rich content editor and also pulling something from the Canvas API and just dropping it into the rich content editor as well. They're like the next two things on my to-do list.
Okay. So what kind of things do you want to be able to pull from the Canvas API to drop in there?
Probably just student names and then shuffle them up into groups and then inject that into the HTML so that teachers can say, oh, this is your group, and hit a button and it reshuffles, and then they can edit it.
Okay.
Because I think that will give me a really good idea on how to access the data in the API and also manipulate it in the rich content editor.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep. So let's see. List students in the course. Let's see. Shuffle the students. Add them to groups, right?
Yeah.
And then insert. Would you insert like here's group 1 and here's the students, here's group 2 and the students, that kind of a thing?
Yeah. So I can find.
Okay. So let's plan on doing that next time. We'll build on this piece of code that we've kind of been working on. There's probably two things here. One is we didn't actually get to the inserting stuff. Because that's sort of the next piece here, right? Like you've got this UI showing. So now when I click on this, we have to generate the request to go to Canvas to insert the thing into the rich content editor. We did that before with just the HTML. We haven't done it with the React yet. So we'll want to do that.
Yeah.
Or I could do that ahead of time and just commit that code and push it up to you. Just depends on if you want to hang out with.
Oh yeah, like I go through all of our tutorials about 3 or 4 times, and I just get my head around it. Because I think we're at a really good place at the moment where we've got a couple of LTI apps, like external ones that do what we want to do, and then we need to figure out what it is they don't do that we want them to do, and then that's what I will build.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of time, like probably end of January, where people will be like, right, this is what I want, Canvas doesn't do it, and these apps don't do it, go build it. So I'm trying to learn as much as I can the LTI and the Canvas API so that I can just design things and build them when we need them.
Okay, sounds good. So let's do that. Let's finish up this tutorial, which will be finish the insert. And then we can hopefully make the script part of that. So we'll do that as one, and then we'll do another one about listing out the students and calling the Canvas API and kind of talking through all
that. That would be cool.
Okay, sounds good.
Sweet. And then I think Stuart will be in touch with you as well, and just to continue the conversation.
All right.
Yeah, so he's pretty happy with the meeting. And fire alarm is going off. I better go.
Yeah, sounds like that's it. So maybe let's shoot for Wednesday at 3. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a look.
Assuming the place hasn't burned to the ground.
Yeah. It's me. Cool. I better go because this is